All right, I am Adam Fishman, the Executive Director of American Friends of Likud, and this is our AFL Zoom meeting. We had a couple last week, including with Minister Yuval Steinitz, and we're very excited to have with us today member of Knesset Avi Dichter. In the previous Knesset, he was the Deputy Defense Minister. He was the Chairman of the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, very prominent committee in the Knesset, and I believe just today was appointed to be part of that committee yet again. And of course is also very well known as being the former head of the Shabak, the Shin Bet, the Israel Security Agency. So the expertise that Avi has about Israel's defense and security goes back a lifetime, certainly much of his lifetime. And we're very excited to have you with us to give us a security briefing. You are speaking with the American Friends of Likud from all over the country, meaning the US, as well as other points abroad. I'll turn it over to you, Avi.
Well, thank you very much. Shalom, Erev Tov here. I believe over there it's sometimes good morning or good day. And just before I forget, I just want to open by saying Chag Sameach, Chag Shavuot Sameach to all of you. And let's dive into our business here in the Middle East. Although we are just here at I think at the end or close to the end of the coronavirus time that lasted about 3 months. And I know that over there in the US, it's still running and still hitting in huge numbers. And we here in Israel, we are getting prepared for, if God forbid, it's going to be a second wave of coronavirus in about October, November. We believe that we should be much better prepared because it was not easy to learn the coronavirus problems right at the beginning. We made some mistakes. In some fields, we were a bit slow and late, but thank God, not too late. And that's, I think, the key success factor to understand your advantages. And here in Israel, you know, we say of the IDF and the security apparatuses, we call them Tzva Ha'am. Like we have Tzva Hashem, we have Tzva Ha'am. And the people's military. And during the coronavirus, the whole security apparatuses, the IDF, the Shin Bet, Mossad, the Ministry of Defense, all of them, I mean, the best units that you can imagine, Sayeret Matkal, the Mossad, they all over. They were recruited, or let's say volunteered to be recruited to help in the fight against the coronavirus. And it's unbelievable to see how soldiers that normally cannot get into Bnei Brak or ultra-Orthodox Haredim neighborhoods, they started to be neighbors, friends, helped Haredim, helped Arab people in the Arab villages. And that probably was one of the main achievements of the Corona time, as people who were not supposed to deal with it, mainly like the people from the military, Shin Bet, the Mossad, they were all participated in helping the Ministry of Health to take care of the coronavirus. They opened, or the Ministry of Defense opened the hotels, tens of hotels, in order to ease the pressure on the hospitals, and brought from all over the intensive care units to make sure that not even one person who needs מכונת הנשמה, how do you say it, Adam? מכונת הנשמה, the breathing machine, or I don't know how they call it in English.
The respiratory machine.
And we always had more machines that people needed. And when we had tens of people who needed it, we had hundreds of machines. When we had 100 people who needed it, we had thousands of them. And we wanted all the time to be one step ahead and one big step ahead. So thank God we can say that we see the end of the coronavirus, even it will last some more weeks or even a few 2-3 months. But as all over the world, we are getting prepared if it's going to be a second round. It's interesting because the coronavirus influenced whole countries around us, including the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and Gaza Strip in small numbers, but mainly from the West Bank because they are working in Israel in tens of thousands of people. We had to take care and tough precautions to make sure that nothing is going to leak from there into Israel. By the way, they were nervous about coronavirus that will leak from Israel into the West Bank. Syria, Lebanon, they were very small numbers. Egypt is huge numbers, but we have no people who are coming from Egypt. Gaza Strip, they were very careful about people who came from Egypt into the Gaza Strip. They put them in isolation at the Rafah crossing. And they, to be honest, they fought it in a very good way, and they have very small numbers of people who got infected by it, including Jordan, because Jordan doesn't have so much tourists, and Jordanian people don't travel overseas like Michiganders of Israel who are traveling all over the world in huge numbers. And when they came back, they brought the coronavirus into Israel. Iran, that's a different story. Iran was infected dramatically in severe numbers. They tried to hide it at the beginning, like you do with everything else. Nuclear weapon or nuclear project, coronavirus, everything that they can hide, they did it. But the coronavirus was a little bit more complicated because people were very nervous about it. In addition to the economic situation in Iran, it's almost a crisis in Iran. And I mention it because it's very important to analyze the security situation, the military situation in the Middle East due to the coronavirus event, because we do understand that Iran, that used to be, I would say, very involved in what's going on in Lebanon, in Syria, in Gaza Strip, in Yemen, they didn't stop getting involved, but they did it in smaller numbers than used to do before. They understood that that's not the time for them to be focused on what's going on in Syria or in Lebanon. The budget that they used to pay to Hezbollah declined dramatically over the last few months. The budget that they handed over to the Hamas and PIJ, Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza Strip, went down as well. And I would say that the coronavirus is the security situation all over. But as we see the end of the coronavirus here in our region, we have to get prepared. By the way, the best signal that it went down is the fact that May 15 is it's our Independence Day, and it's their Nakba. Nakba means they mourn the day, May 15, 1948, when they lost their land. And normally every year we have some event during and around this day. Nothing happened. In March 30th, it's Yom HaAdama, it's the Earth Day, that normally you have events, I mean violence. This time everybody was at home. But now we are just ended the Islam holiday, Eid al-Fitr, yesterday, the 3 days at the end of, right after the 30 days of Ramadan. And now we have to look forward and to ask ourselves what kind of Middle East we are going to face in the coming months. As we all know, Iran is sponsoring few proxies in our region that influence dramatically the situation in Israel. They support Hezbollah in Lebanon. They support in Syria Hezbollah, some troops who are in Syria, some troops who are the Shiite militia in Syria. It's a kind of a foreign legion that we all remember many years ago, that this foreign legion contains terrorists from all over, from Pakistan, Afghanistan, former Soviet Union Muslim countries, and of course from Iran itself, from Iraq, and from Syria. Few tens of thousands who are in Iraq and Syria. They're trying to push them forward, to equip them with some kind of weapons in order to build them as an offensive system towards Israel one day. Of course, Israel is trying to block Iran in Syria by all means. It's not easy because in many cases they are far away. There is a kind of a pressure by Russia against it. There is a pressure by Syria, by Bashar al-Assad regime. But the problem is that Iran is invested in Syria in billions of dollars. And of course, they want the return of such an investment. And that's why Bashar al-Assad cannot send them back. There is a competition between Russia and Iran about the revenues in Syria. Now that the war in Syria is almost over is more than 600,000 people got killed, mainly civilians. There are 2.5 million injured people in Syria. There are 6 million people in Syria who are not in Syria anymore. They are in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Turkey, and some of them in Europe. There are 6 million people in Syria, refugees in their own country. But now, as they are trying to rebuild Syria, Russia wants a return of its investment. Iran wants the same return of its investment. And that's a kind of a competition that we have to follow. And it's interesting to see. Iran, of course, is focused on another very strong ally, proxy, Hezbollah in Lebanon. It's a very dangerous one because it enjoys a budget that used to be $1 billion a year. It went down to almost half. But Hezbollah in Lebanon is very powerful, very well equipped, very well developed with the cutting edge technology, trying to build accurate weapon, accurate long-range missiles toward Israel. And we do understand that the next round between Hezbollah and Israel is going to be different, not just in the front, but in many cities inside Israel, and we are getting prepared for it. The other proxies in the south, in Gaza Strip, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, PIJ, they are trying to rebuild themselves. They keep quiet this time of coronavirus, but we do understand that it's not going to last long. And on any case that Israel will attack any installations inside Gaza Strip, we do understand we are going to find another round or rounds of fighting with them. Just to be fully transparent, Hamas contains in Gaza Strip 30,000 terrorists. Palestinian Islamic Jihad, it's 10,000 terrorists. It's not a terrorist cell, it's a military. Gaza Strip is an entity of terrorists with military equipment, and that's something that Israel will have to take one day care of it. In my eyes, and I'm telling it right now, in my eyes, the dismantling of the military weapon in Gaza Strip will have to be done by Israel in a military operation that will be very similar to the defensive fleet operation, but in very different scale. It won't be for 2 weeks and won't be for 2 months. It's going to be a long, long story, and we have to get prepared for it. Another proxy that Iran is pushing forward is the Houthis in Yemen. The Houthis are shooting almost every week long-range missiles towards Saudi Arabia. Missiles were brought from Iran into Yemen. It's a good question to ask. So what Israel has to do with it? It's true that the Houthis till now didn't bother Israel with the long-range missiles or with any other kind of attacks. But we all know that the gate to Israel from the Indian Ocean, the southern gate in Eilat, starts in Yemen at the Bab el-Mandab Straits. And these straits are very narrow. Once the Houthis will decide to attack ships who are going towards Israel, it's going to be a very complicated situation, because even if you want to defend it, it's very, very far away to be to use Israeli airplanes to fight up until there. It's a long story. We do hope that the Houthis won't start with it. I'm sure that we all remember the pirates who attacked vessels and oil carriers in this area. But once it starts to be ships are going to Israel, not just Israelis, but even others, you may pay a very high price by it. And we don't want our southern border or southern gate to be closed. Now, the Houthis is a kind of a laboratory for us to learn what does it mean, the Iranian long-range missiles. These missiles reach a distance of about 1,000 kilometers, 700 kilometers. It's the same missiles that were brought into Lebanon to the hands of Hezbollah. Once those missiles are getting more accurate, more precise by putting a new device, it makes it much more complicated for us. So if I sum it up, the neighboring terrorists pushed by Iran, it's a very pessimistic situation, and terrorists have one bad habit. They like to carry out terror attacks. And that's the problem. In the West Bank, we have a different system. We have the Palestinian Authority that is very busy with itself because they enjoy a very good economy due to Israel. By the way, the currency, the legal currency in both, in West Bank and Gaza Strip, is still Israeli money, the Israeli shekel. Even though the Palestinian Authority exists 26 years, they still use the shekel, not the dollar, not the euro, not the Jordanian money, and not the Egyptian money in Gaza Strip. So it shows you that they are highly connected economically with the state of Israel, and tens of thousands of people are working legally. Tens of thousands of others are working illegally in Israel. And about 20 to 25,000 people, Palestinians, work in the Israeli settlements in the West Bank and in the industrial areas over there. So they know it's not that easy to start making problems with Israel, although the Palestinian Authority is trying to show kind of muscles, even during the last a few days. As a matter of fact, just last Sunday, President Mahmoud Abbas stated in a session, in a conference of the Central Committee of the PLO, and he said something that was translated by all the media as the Palestinian Authority decided to cut all agreements and to stop all agreements with Israel. But fortunately, I speak Arabic and I can listen to the words. And he used the word in Arabic, which is not a total erase and canceling of the relations. And he used the word, he said, نحن في حل الاتفاقات مع إسرائيل. And the people in the crowd, mainly from the PFLP, shouted and said, why do you say ilgha, which means canceling? And he didn't use the word ilgha, which means canceling, and he knew why. Because once he is saying it officially, on record, I cut all ties with Israel, he knows he is in trouble. Because the Palestinian Authority has much more to lose than the state of Israel from cutting those ties. And if, God forbid, the Palestinian Authority is going to be back a land of terrorists, a land of suicide bombings, etc., we won't allow it to fall in the hands of Hamas. And defensive fleet operation in a very fast break system this time will be back in order to block all those terrorists in their home. And trust me, the whole Palestinian Authority security apparatuses and the whole employees, it's about tens of thousands who came from Tunis and all other parts of the world 26 years ago. They don't want to go anywhere. They know that if they go to Tunis back, they will live like cats in the streets. So now they have power in their hands, they have budget, they have houses, they have car, they have authority. So as we say in our language in the Middle East, kalam fish ala jumruk, which means you don't have to pay tax for words. So they speak up, they speak loud. I can assure you they won't dare to say, all right, we close the doors of the Palestinian Authority. From now on, it's your problem, Israel's problem. Because they know that the time that they thought is on their side became time on the Israeli side. Many years ago, when the Palestinian Authority just established, we had less than 100,000 people in the West Bank. Today we have close to 500,000 Israelis, Jewish people in the West Bank. They know that years ago, to speak about Jerusalem as an Israeli capital and to move the American embassy to Jerusalem was lip service and nothing more than that. What happened over the last 2 years, Jerusalem was stated the capital of Israel. The American embassy moved to Jerusalem, and other countries speak about Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. The Golan Heights is under Israeli sovereignty, and the talks are about sovereignty in the West Bank and the Israeli villages over there, in the Jordan Valley, in the wide Jordan Valley. If you remember decades ago, we used to hear people speak about the Jordan River as the eastern border of Israel. Not anymore. It's the Jordan Valley, in the wide meaning of the Jordan Valley, is the eastern river of Israel. I know that Jordan, the king of Jordan, said that it's going to cause a problem, whatever. Trust me, if you will invite to a Zoom meeting the king of Jordan, and it will be classified and nobody will leak any word from the meeting, he will tell you, I don't want the Palestinians to be a neighbor of the Jordanian Hashemite kingdom. I want Israel between the Palestinian Authority and Jordan, because we do know what does it mean, the Palestinians inside Jordan. To remind you, in 1970, Black September, King Hussein, his father of King Abdullah, killed 10,000 terrorists in a few months. More than any other country, including Israel, did to the Palestinian terrorists. So, as I said, in the Middle East, you don't have to pay tax for words, so they can say anything else. But we do understand that the opportunity to make sure that Israelis who live in the West Bank will be treated by the government in Israel, by the state of Israel, exactly like people who live in Petah Tikva, Haifa, Beersheba, or any other village. There's no doubt that the Israelis who live there are, before everything else, are Israelis, same as you, Adam, and myself. So I just want to, before I open it to the questions, to answer the questions, I just want one remark about Iran. As I said, Iran is a key country in our region. We hear very small or very few sentences about Iran's role in the nuclear project. We have to remember, not even once Iran brought to the table a new event about its nuclear project. In every single case, if you look backward, before the agreement after the agreement in 2015, every single new information about Iranian nuclear sites were put on the table due to intelligence that used to be recruited and brought by countries, mainly by Israel. Not just by Israel, but mainly by Israel. And therefore, when we look at Iran now, and we know that the Iranian economy is in a big crash, the coronavirus just strengthened it. But nevertheless, Iran didn't put aside the nuclear project. They mean it, they work for it, they put special budget for it. And I'm sure as an intelligence person that we'll never know 100% about the nuclear project in Iran. And once we understand we'll never be able to know 100%, we have to be prepared for surprises. To remind you, in the 90s, when the agreement with North Korea, between North Korea and the United States or other countries started, nobody knew that within a very short time, North Korea will have nuclear bombs. So we have to be well prepared to work very hard to make sure that Iran is not going to surprise us. I think that the archive that the Mossad brought from Tehran last year was a very good opportunity to share our knowledge about what's going on in Iran with all our allies, mainly with the United States, but with some more countries, including in Europe, to make sure that they understand that when Iran keeps silent, it doesn't mean that the nuclear project is dead. Unfortunately, it is not. And I always say for us in Israel, when we heard the threatening coming from the highest level in Iran, and when they say we intend to destroy the state of Israel, in security, a threat is measured by two elements: intentions and capabilities. When you hear the intentions by the highest level in Iran, you have to be very, very careful about when and if they're going to reach capabilities. And that's the main effort of the state of Israel, but I would say not just of the state of Israel. When Iran is building and developing new large, long-range missiles, it's something that we have to take into account. We, I mean Israel, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, when they launch to the orbit a satellite, the satellite is not the issue. The missile who launched it and put it in the orbit, that's the issue. And we have to be very careful and to analyze it very, very carefully, because I read in many places that it was a failure and the satellite is a toy. First of all, it's not a toy. It's not the most developed satellite. But the missile who brought it up, that's something new we have to take into account. So just before opening to the question, again, Chag Shavuot Sameach, and don't worry. I know it sounds not that optimistic, but you know, in the Middle East, an optimistic person is a pessimistic with experience.
Avi, thank you very much for that very, very comprehensive overview and briefing, security briefing of the difficult neighborhood that Israel resides. A couple of questions, though, with respect to the thing that is the hottest topic, it seems, right now, and that is with applying Israeli sovereignty on portions of the Jordan Valley and other communities in Yudan and Shomron, in Judea and Samaria. Specifically, a couple of questions from Steve Goldberg and from Jerry Platt, Steve Goldberg in California and Jerry in New York. The first from Steve is, do you expect any violence from other countries or the Palestinians as a result of the decision to apply Israeli sovereignty? Now, that assumes that it's going to happen. I know that the Prime Minister has said it's going to happen along the lines of the Trump plan, and that's where I will get to Jerry's question, where we know it's helpful that Israel receives Jewish American support for applying Israeli sovereignty in the Jordan Valley and some parts of Yudan and Shomron, but because there are a number of progressive groups that are making a lot of noise and very loud statements against it, Perhaps you can emphasize and explain a little bit more about the initiative and why it's so important to Israel's security, especially because, as you just mentioned, you said that time is no longer on the Palestinian side. Time is really on our side. And I would ask, is it really on our side, or do we just have perhaps a short window either until November with the current administration and perhaps hopefully another 4 years with a very friendly administration? And I'll turn it to you to discuss that.
Well, no doubt the current administration in Washington and the United States showed us something that we haven't seen before. I mean, to move the embassy to Jerusalem and to recognize Jerusalem as the Israeli capital, it happened very fast. I remember in the Knesset, when Vice President spoke from the podium in the Knesset and said that within 1 year, the American embassy will move to Jerusalem. When he got back to Washington, the embassy or the announcement about moving the embassy came directly and said within few months, and really within 4 months, the embassy moved. It's something that we were not used to it. I think that it showed you that things that lasted since 1947, since the declaration in the United Nations Assembly about Jerusalem, who is not supposed to be part of the State of Israel due to the partition plan, it was a decision by the United Nations, the partition plan that was confirmed in 29th of November 1947. And the Israeli administration at that time, it was not the government, under David Ben-Gurion, accepted it. The Arabs rejected it. And I'm telling you, always count on the Arabs. If you look backward, in every single interchange, they made a mistake. They made a mistake that helped us to achieve things that we couldn't believe we were going to achieve, with high prices. In 1948, right after the announcement of the decision of the United Nations, they invaded into Israel with 7 armies. Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Sudan. And we fought for our independence. We've lost 1% of the Israeli population at that time in Israel. 6,000 people got killed out of 600,000 people who lived at that time in Israel. It's a dramatic issue. Just take it in your proportion in the United States. What does it mean 1%? It's something unbelievable. And I think that the second time, and we ended the independence war, we got part of Jerusalem, only the west side of Jerusalem. Otherwise, try to imagine that the state of Israel, if the Arabs would accept it, like the Jewish administration did, Israel was a different country with half of the Galilee from Akko to Carmiel or to Nazareth, and north, it was Arab. The seashore of Ramle was the western city of the West Bank. Beersheba was the southeast city of the West Bank. Can you imagine Israel without those cities? And Jerusalem was under international sovereignty. The Arabs made a mistake, and we got only part of Jerusalem, the west side. In 1967, they fixed it. They, I mean the Arabs. Why? Because when Gamal Abdel Nasser, the president of Egypt, started to run on the ground steps to offense Israel, blocked the straits to Eilat, and kicked off the United Nations troops. And Israel decided that the only way is to, as we say in Hebrew, Hakam le'orgecha, Ashkem le'orgo, or in Arabic, if I translate to English, before they're going to have us for dinner, we're going to have them for lunch. and the strike against Egypt started, and we warned King Hussein, don't open fire against Israel. We have no intention to do anything against Jordan. But as I said, always count on the Arabs. King Hussein got a call from Gamal Abdel Nasser, the Egyptian president, and he told him, we are winning the war against Israel in the south. And King Hussein said, all right, I have a very good opportunity to take back the west side of Jerusalem from the Jews. And he opened fire. And within 3 days, the IDF took not just all Jerusalem, but all the West Bank. And finally, we've got all Jerusalem and all the West Bank till the Jordan Valley. If I go farther than that, when we opened the tunnel along the Western Wall, I'm sure that all of you visited the tunnels that goes along the Western Wall. When we opened it in September 1996, very strong events and powerful and violence started. The Palestinian Authority soldiers, policemen opened fire towards Israelis, killed 6 soldiers in Joseph Tomb in Nablus, Shem, killed high-ranking officer in Gaza Strip by fire from Palestinian policemen. And all of them, and all of us, of course, it was well understood that the Western Wall tunnel is going along the wall from outside the Temple Mount and not toward the Temple Mount. I mentioned it just to make sure that we all remember that violence is not just when Israel is making something wrong. The fact that we are here in Israel is the meaning on the Arab side is that we are on the wrong place. So it's a debate. It's a debate maybe for many years. I don't know, hundreds, thousands. But we have to make sure that when we have an opportunity to do something different, new, that will contribute to the state of Israel, something that we needed. The settlements all along the West Bank were built by all kinds of Israeli governments, from the left and from the right. The Jordan Valley as the eastern border of Israel, it's an idea that was brought by Yigal Allon, that no doubt about it, he's from the left. And Derech Allon, a long road that goes all along the West Bank from the east side of the West Bank, but west side of the Jordan Valley, it's well understood that it was built in order to make sure that when we speak about the Jordan Valley as the eastern border, it will be from the river to the road. Unlike the Palestinians who say, Palestinian is free from the river to the sea. We are a little bit more modest. It's from the river to the Alon Road. That's the eastern border. The settlements and the cities in the West Bank, people who are living there for years, were brought there by Israeli governments, not by the Likud. It's true that the Likud has a very strong idea and is putting it forward mainly during the last years that we are in power, since Menachem Begin in 1977, and later on under Ariel Sharon, Olmert, and when he left the Likud, and Prime Minister Netanyahu over the last 11 years. And now we are about to be with 500,000 people, Israelis, who live there. It's second generation, third generation, despite all kind of violence. I was there at the first Intifada, and I was head of Shin Bet at the second Intifada, which was a very bloody Intifada. We've lost 1,200 people, mainly from suicide bombings. But we do understand we live in an area that our neighbors at the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank or in the Gaza Strip, they have in their mind only one thing: how the hell we get rid of those Jewish people there? And we have different plans, total different plans. And it's not enough to live with plans. From time to time, when you have the opportunity to do something we believe had to be done, we have to do it. And I think that sovereignty in the cities, the villages in the West Bank, it's something that we are obliged to the Israelis. Why someone who lives in Tel Aviv has to be treated by a regular ministry of the government, and the same person who lives in Ofra or in Beit El or in Hebron or in Itamar, why he should be treated by the Minhal Ezrachi, the civil administration? Why? I think so many years after, we can make a change. Of course, we do understand that the United States under President Trump is trying to run a complete and comprehensive plan. I've been there with the plans. I'm telling you, in all former plans, whether under President Bush, including the roadmap, and before that under Clinton, and now under Trump, and all in between, you know, the George Tenet's war plan and General Zini plan, in all cases, you'll never get an answer from the Palestinians. Not a positive answer and not a negative answer. You don't get an answer. If we shall have to wait up until the Palestinians will decide what do they want to, trust me, you'll have a Zoom with my grandkids and your grandkids. But my plans and other Israelis' plans are different. I think that when we have 500,000 people in the West Bank, we have to do something. And that's the time. Sometimes you can wait another year, 2 years, 5 years, a decade, and you have to ask yourself, is there any significant change on the other side? Look, when I see Mahmoud Abbas is saying on record, we shall continue paying salaries to the terrorists who are sitting in Israeli jail, knowing that they killed Israelis and they were sentenced to life imprisonment, 1 year, 1 term, or I think 67 life imprisonment is the biggest number of years that someone got in the Palestinian Authority. When you as a government, when you pay salaries to terrorists because they are terrorists, you are not going my way. You're going the different way. And we passed the bill. I led it with Stern, with a member of Knesset Stern. We passed the bill to cut the amount of money. It's 1.3 billion shekel. Practically, we cut about 700 million shekel every year from the money that we transfer to the Palestinian Authority. And they say, even the last shekel we shall have, we'll give it not to a poor man, but to a terrorist in Israeli jail. That's a state of mind we cannot accept it. And we do understand that if that's the way they think, we should have to think in a different way that will serve the Israeli interests, but also will serve the human being way of thinking. There's no country in the world that believes that a terrorist should become an employee of its own services. No way to do it. So we do understand what's going on. When they threaten us that they're going to cut all cooperation of security between the Palestinian apparatus and the Israelis, it's not easy to live under such a condition. And I know there was a question, someone asked a question about it. You have three people who ask questions from California, New York, and Florida. It's okay, all over the country. But I think that we have to understand the Palestinian Authority, the way that they think about cooperation and security is not the way that we think about it. 26 years after the Palestinian Authority was established, there's not even one terrorist who carried out a terror attack against Israelis, killed, injured Israelis, were detained by the Palestinian Authority, were brought to justice by the prosecution. The judge sentenced him to X years in jail, and he's spending the time in jail. Not even one. After 26 years, they don't have the chain of command when it comes to terror attacks or terrorists who attacked Israel. It's something that, I remember when leaders from the left are going to Ramallah to meet with Mahmoud Abbas, and when they come back, and they tell me, Avi, we met here, it's a very warming meeting. I said, did you ask him about the salaries he pays to the terrorists in Israeli jail? And they say, no, Avi. And you know why? I'll tell you why they don't ask the question. Because before any meeting, there are preconditions. One of the preconditions, don't ask questions about salaries to terrorists. So it's not going to be easy. Timing in life is very important. And I think that we are now in a very significant timing that I don't know what's going to be next year. Sometimes you have to do what you believe should be done, and maybe we should do it years ago, but that's the time. And I'm sure that July 1st, as Prime Minister Netanyahu stated, July 1st, something is going to start. And we have to wait. It's just 1 month from now, almost. 1 month and a few days, that's it.
Avi, I want to thank you for taking the time. I know that you had a couple of questions that were sent to you earlier, and you responded to all of them in very broad fashion. You should know that there is a line out the door of our Q&A here of people that want to ask you questions. And I want to apologize to everyone that we aren't going to be able to get to them. Some of them were answered in Avi's talk. I do want to, however, point out, just because we are well over the time that you had allotted for us, and I appreciate that. That also today, not only were you named to the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, but you were also named in the Knesset to be the chairman of the Parliamentary Fund, which, as I understand, oversees the distribution of gas royalties in Israel as well. So I know you're going to be very busy with that new responsibility moving forward. And I want to thank you, Avi, for joining us. I want to thank everyone for joining us and for being the great defender and protector of Israel for all these many, many years. And thank you for joining American Friends of Likud, all of those of you who have joined us on the call. And we were almost at capacity. I thank you. And again, I encourage you to please go to aflikud.org and to continue to support us so we can continue to have these type of exclusive interactions with our Israeli leadership. Chag Sameach to everyone. Thank you, Avi. Thank you so much.
Chag Shavuot Sameach to all of you. I'm delighted to talk in English about the Likud. It's something that we don't do very often. So I'm really glad that we had the opportunity to talk with each other. I miss you because I don't see your faces. So I don't know when it will be able to meet with each other, but when you come to Israel and flights will return, please don't hesitate. Come to the Knesset. We love you, but more than that, we miss you.
We love you and we miss you too, and we will take you up on that offer. We'll see you in the Knesset as soon as we can. All the best.
Shalom, shalom, Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.